They say if you see someone waving on Route 666, don't stop, because that's not a person. It's a ghost who used to be just like you. They lure you in with a smile, then drag you into the asphalt, screaming. Your car becomes a tomb. Your screams? They're recorded and uploaded. And the next victim? They'll watch your video right before they die. This isn't a legend. It's happening right now. Route 666 didn't exist on any official map, but it appeared every night at exactly 11:59 p.m. on GPS apps, glowing red like a warning. Locals called it the Regret Road. Legend said if you drove past mile marker 0 after midnight, you couldn't turn back, and the only way out was to meet the ones you left behind. No one knew who started the myth, but dozens had vanished on that stretch of rural highway over the years. Their cars were always found abandoned, doors locked, engines cold, dash cams filled with screams. Tonight, 23-year-old Noah took the shortcut anyway. He was running from a DUI charge, heart pounding, eyes darting to the rearview mirror, when his GPS flickered and rerouted him onto Route 666. He laughed nervously. "Just a glitch," he muttered. But as his tires crunched over the cracked asphalt of the empty road, the trees seemed to lean closer, and the air grew thick with the scent of wet earth and decay. His headlights caught something ahead, a figure in a tattered white dress, waving gently from the shoulder. It was his mother. She'd been dead for 10 years, and she was smiling. Noah slammed the brakes, his breath fogging the windshield. "Mom," he whispered, disbelief warring with hope. She hadn't aged a day. Same soft eyes, same gentle wave, but something was off. Her feet didn't touch the ground, and the road behind her, it shimmered like a mirage. He rolled down the window. "Is it really you?" She nodded slowly, lips parting as if to speak, but no sound came. Instead, a cold wind rushed into the car, carrying the stench of grave soil and rotting lilies. The GPS voice cut in, calm and robotic. "Destination reached. Please meet your passenger." Noah's blood turned to ice. He tried to shift into drive, but the gear stick wouldn't move. His phone lost signal. The headlights dimmed. His mother began walking toward the car, gliding more than stepping, her dress stained with dark patches that looked like dried blood. Panic clawed at his throat. He locked the doors, but then a soft tap on the passenger window. He turned. She was already inside, sitting beside him, smiling. "You left me alone in the hospital, Noah," she whispered, voice wet and guttural. "Now it's your turn to wait forever." Noah screamed and threw himself against the driver's door, but it wouldn't budge. His mother's hand, cold as stone, closed around his wrist. Her skin peeled back slightly, revealing blackened veins and wriggling maggots beneath. "You promised to stay with me until the end," she said, her voice now layered with dozens of others. Men, women, children, all whispering in agony. The car's interior began to rot. The seats cracked open, oozing thick pus. The dashboard melted like wax, wires twitching like dying snakes. Outside, more figures emerged from the fog. Dozens of them, standing along the road, all with hollow eyes and gaping mouths. They were the ones who'd vanished before him, and they were hungry. His mother leaned closer, her breath reeking of decay. "The road demands balance," she rasped. "For every soul you abandoned, you must give your flesh." She plunged her fingers into his chest. Ribs cracked like dry twigs. Blood sprayed the windshield, and as his heart was torn out, the dashcam's red light blinked on, recording everything for the next lost driver. 2 nights later, a young couple, Lena and Jake, argued over GPS directions on a lonely country road. "Just take the next exit," Lena urged, sensing something wrong with the silence. But Jake, stubborn and tired, ignored her. Then the screen flickered, recalculating Route 666. It announced cheerfully. Before they could react, the road ahead twisted unnaturally, trees bending like bones. Their car screeched to a halt at mile marker 0. Outside, fog swallowed everything, and standing beside a rusted, blood-splattered sedan was a boy in a soaked school uniform. Lena's little brother, who drowned 5 years ago. "Lena!" he called, voice trembling with joy. "You came back for me." Tears filled her eyes. She reached for the door handle. "Don't!" Jake grabbed her arm. "That's not him. Look at his eyes." Lena turned and froze. The boy's eyes were completely black, tears of thick blood streaming down his pale cheeks. Behind him, dozens of ghostly figures emerged from the mist, dragging chains made of car parts. The GPS chimed again. "Welcome to Route 666. Your past is waiting." Jake yanked Lena back into the seat and stomped on the gas. The engine roared, but the road stretched endlessly ahead, looping back on itself like a snake eating its tail. The boy outside began to scream, his voice shifting into something guttural and inhuman. His jaw unhinged, stretching wider than possible, revealing rows of broken glass teeth. The blood tears turned into streams, pooling on the asphalt and crawling toward their tires like living veins. "It's feeding on your guilt," Jake yelled. "Don't look at him." But Lena couldn't look away. She saw the night he drowned, her holding his hand, then letting go to grab her phone. The boy's hand shot forward, impossibly long, and punched through the windshield. Glass shattered. Cold fingers wrapped around Jake's throat. He choked, eyes bulging, as the ghost dragged him through the shattered window. Lena screamed, slamming the gas, but the car wouldn't move. The GPS voice whispered softly. "One passenger claimed. One remains." Outside, the boy smiled. "It's okay, Lena," he said, voice sweet again. "You can stay with me now, forever." Lena sat alone in the driver's seat, trembling, Jake's blood still warm on her clothes. The engine was dead. The headlights flickered once, then died, plunging her into near-total darkness. Only the soft red glow of the GPS remained, pulsing like a heartbeat. Outside, her brother stood motionless, his black eyes fixed on her. The road behind him was no longer empty. Dozens of ghostly vehicles lined it, doors open, interiors stained with old blood. She could hear whispers from each one. Pleas, sobs, final prayers. "You let me slip away," her brother said, voice gentle but edged with sorrow. "Now the road won't let you go." Lena's breath hitched. She fumbled for her phone, no signal of course, but the camera still worked. On instinct, she turned it toward the window. Through the screen, she didn't see her brother. She saw a rotting corpse in a soaked uniform, jaw hanging by tendons, eyes crawling with insects. The real horror wasn't in the memory. It was in the truth, and the truth wanted her flesh. The car door creaked open on its own. "Come on, Lena," the thing that looked like her brother whispered. "It's time to pay your toll." Lena scrambled backward, but there was nowhere to go. The back seat was already occupied by figures she recognized. A woman with a slit throat from a viral urban legend. A trucker who vanished in '98. Even Noah, the man from the dashcam video she'd seen online weeks ago. His chest hollowed out, ribs jutting like broken wings. They didn't speak. They just watched, eyes hungry, mouth stitched shut with rusted wire. Her brother stepped closer, his bare feet leaving bloody prints on the asphalt. "The road collects what you owe," he said. "Guilt, regret, flesh." Lena's mind raced. She remembered reading that Route 666 only existed for those who carried unresolved grief. She'd never mourned him properly. Too ashamed to admit she'd prioritized a selfie over saving him. Now, the road was extracting payment. In pieces. Her brother reached through the open door, hand outstretched. "Take my hand," he said sweetly. "It won't hurt much." Behind him, the ghosts began to moan in unison. A chorus of the damned, welcoming her to their eternal loop. Tears streamed down Lena's face as she stared at her brother's outstretched hand. She wanted to believe it was him. She wanted to believe forgiveness was possible. But the rot in his eyes told another story. With a sob, she lunged for the glove compartment and found a rusted pocket knife Jake had kept there. She flicked it open, blade glinting in the GPS's red light. "You're not my brother," she choked out. "My brother forgave me the day he died." The thing's smile vanished. its face twisted into a snarl, flesh peeling back to reveal a skull lined with glass shards. The other ghosts wailed, surging forward. Lena slashed the air, and the blade passed through her brother's arm, leaving a trail of black smoke and the stench of burning hair. He shrieked, stumbling back. For a second, the road flickered, revealing a glimpse of the real world. Trees, stars, freedom. Hope flared in her chest. She slammed her foot on the gas. The engine roared to life. The car jerked forward, but the road twisted again, looping her back to mile marker 0. The ghosts laughed. The GPS whispered, "Escape is part of the game." Lena's hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white. She realized the truth. The road wasn't just punishing her. It was curating her suffering. Every loop refined her fear, sharpened her regret, until she'd begged to stay. She looked at the dashcam. Its red light blinked steadily. That's when she understood. The screams weren't just recordings, they were invitations. Each video uploaded online lured another soul to Route 660, and she'd watched them all. She was part of the cycle before she even arrived. Her brother appeared at the passenger window again, face half melted, voice gentle. "You don't have to suffer alone, Lena." She shook her head, tears blurring her vision. "I already did." Suddenly, she slammed the car into reverse and stomped on the gas. Tires screeched as the vehicle shot backward, away from the mile marker, away from the ghosts. The trees blurred. The GPS screamed static. For 3 glorious seconds, she was free. Then the headlights hit a figure standing in the road, herself, drenched in blood, eyes empty. The car crashed. Glass exploded, and the GPS whispered, "Welcome home." Then the soft click of a seatbelt unlatching. Lena crawled out of the wreck, glass crunching under her palms. Her body ached, but she was alive, or so she thought. She looked down, and saw her hands were pale, almost translucent. Blood no longer flowed from her cuts. The night air passed through her like wind through smoke. Behind her, the car's dashcam light blinked red. On the screen, she saw herself still inside the vehicle, unconscious, bleeding, dying. That's when she knew. She hadn't escaped. She'd transitioned. The road didn't kill you, turned you into bait. Her brother appeared beside her, whole again, smiling sadly. "Now you understand," he said. "We don't haunt the road. The road haunts the living." He pointed to the highway. In the distance, headlights approached. A new driver, a new soul. Lena's mouth moved, but no sound came out. The GPS inside the wrecked car whispered, "Recording, please scream clearly." And as the approaching car slowed near the crash site, Lena raised her hand and waved. The approaching car, a battered sedan with flickering brake lights, slowed to a stop just yards from the wreck. A young man stepped out, hood up against the chill, flashlight in hand. "Hey, you okay?" he called, voice edged with concern. Lena stood motionless, her translucent form barely visible in the dim glow of his phone. She wanted to scream, to warn him, but her throat produced only a hollow rasp. Her brother placed a cold hand on her shoulder. "You can't save them," he whispered. "No one ever does." The man knelt beside the crashed car, peering inside. He saw Lena's dying body twitch, eyes fluttering open. "Hold on," he said, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling 911, but there was no signal." Of course, the GPS inside the wreck flickered to life. "Emergency services unavailable. Would you like to meet a loved one?" The man frowned. Then, from the back seat of his own car, a child's voice whispered, "Daddy, why did you leave me at the gas station?" His blood ran cold. He turned slowly, and there she was, his daughter, drenched in rain, eyes black as oil. Route 666 had claimed another. Lena watched helplessly as the man's expression shifted from confusion to horror. His daughter, alive just 6 months ago, lost during a road trip when he'd momentarily stepped away, now stood before him, water dripping from her clothes, lips blue with cold. "You promised you'd never let go," she said, voice trembling. He took a step back, tripping over a rock. I I didn't mean to. I was only gone for a minute. The girl's face twisted. Her jaw unhinged with a wet crack, revealing rows of needle-thin teeth. A minute was enough, she hissed. She lunged, and her hands, now skeletal, plunged into his chest. Ribs snapped. Blood sprayed across the windshield of his car. Lena turned away, but her brother gripped her chin, forcing her to watch. "This is your role now," he said gently. "You guide them in. You make them stay." The man's body collapsed, twitching. His daughter knelt beside him, whispering something only the dead could hear. Then she looked up at Lena and smiled. The GPS chimed. New passenger registered. Cycle renewed. Days passed, or what felt like days. Time on Route 666 had no rhythm, only repetition. Lena now stood at different points along the road, always wearing the same blood-stained jacket, always waving with a hollow smile. She'd learned the rules. Appear calm, speak softly, exploit their guilt. The road fed on regret like oxygen, and she was its perfect instrument. She watched as a grieving widow stopped to help a lost girl by the roadside, only to be dragged into a phantom school bus by the ghosts of children she'd failed to save as a teacher. She saw a soldier haunted by his fallen squad mates, who emerged from the fog in tattered uniforms, begging him to come back to the front line. He walked into the woods with them, and never returned. Each soul added to the chorus of whispers that filled the air. And with every new victim, Lena felt herself fading further, her memories blurring, her sense of self dissolving like mist. She wasn't Lena anymore. She was just part of the road. One night, a familiar car appeared on the horizon. Her old sedan, the one she'd driven with Jake. Her heart, or what remained of it, lurched. Behind the wheel sat a woman who looked exactly like her. Same eyes, same hesitant smile. "No," Lena whispered. "Not her." It was her younger sister, Maya, who'd spent years blaming herself for not being there the night Lena disappeared. Maya had followed rumors online, traced the dashcam videos, and come searching for answers. She slowed near the wreck, now rusted, overgrown with weeds, and saw Lena standing by the roadside. Tears filled Maya's eyes. "Lena?" she called out, voice breaking. Lena wanted to run, to scream, to vanish, but the road held her in place. Her brother appeared beside her, silent. The GPS in Maya's car flickered. "Loved one detected. Would you like to reunite?" Maya stepped out, arms open. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I should have come sooner." Lena raised her hand and waved. Maya ran toward her, tears streaming. "I never stopped looking for you," she cried, arms outstretched. Lena stood frozen, her ghostly form trembling. She wanted to embrace her sister, to warn her, to beg her to leave. But the road pulsed beneath her feet, demanding payment. Her mouth moved on its own. "I missed you too, Maya." The words tasted like ash. Maya sobbed with relief and stepped closer, right into the trap. The moment her foot crossed the roadside gravel, the air turned icy. The trees groaned. From the wrecked sedan, Jake's ghost emerged, neck twisted, eyes weeping black fluid. Behind him, dozens of spectral figures rose from the earth. Noah, the trucker, the woman with the slit throat, all reaching for Maya. "No!" Lena screamed, but her voice was silent. Maya turned, eyes wide with dawning horror. The GPS in her car announced cheerfully, "Family reunion complete. Therapy begins now." And as Maya was dragged screaming into the asphalt, Lena felt something she hadn't felt in years. True, human guilt. But it was too late. The road had already claimed her soul. Lena collapsed to her knees as Maya's screams faded into the asphalt, swallowed by the road like rain into dry earth. Her chest ached with a phantom pain she hadn't felt since she was human. Guilt, real, raw, unbearable, burned through her spectral form like acid. She looked at her hands, now darker, veins pulsing with black energy. The road wasn't just punishing the living, it was transforming its ghosts too. Every betrayal she enabled, every soul she lured, twisted her further from who she once was. Her brother appeared beside her, his expression unreadable. "You feel it now, don't you?" he said softly. "The weight of what we do." Lena nodded, tears of shadow streaming down her face. "I didn't want this," she whispered. "But you chose it the moment you let me drown," he replied. "And now you choose it every time you wave." In the distance, another pair of headlights cut through the fog. Lena stood slowly, shoulders slumped. The cycle demanded continuity, and she was no longer a victim. She was the bait, the guide, the beginning of someone else's end. The new car slowed. A vintage pickup, mud-splattered and weary. A man in his 50s stepped out, eyes red from crying. In his hand, a photo of a teenage girl, his daughter missing for 3 weeks. He'd followed a viral video of a girl waving by Route 666, hoping it was her. Lena watched him with hollow eyes. She knew his story before he spoke. They all had the same wound, regret dressed as hope. "Hello?" he called, voice cracking. Lena raised her hand slowly, the same gesture she'd used 100 times before. He sobbed in relief. "Emily?" She didn't correct him. She couldn't. The road thrummed under her feet, hungry. As he rushed toward her, she saw flashes of what awaited him. His daughter's ghost dragging him into a ditch, his body buried under roots, his screams recorded for the next desperate father. And yet she smiled, because the road doesn't just feed on guilt, it feeds on love. And love, in the dark, looks just like hope. The GPS in his truck chimed. Destination reached. Please meet your passenger. Lena watched as the man embraced the illusion, his arms closing around empty air where her form should have been. But the road filled the gap. His daughter's ghost materialized in his arms, cold and wet, whispering lies of forgiveness. Then, in one fluid motion, she snapped his neck. He crumpled like paper. The ghosts emerged from the trees, silent and ravenous. They dragged his body into the woods, where roots coiled around his limbs like serpents. His truck's engine died. The headlights flickered out. Only the GPS remained active, screen glowing red, passenger secured, recording therapy session. Lena turned away, but the road wouldn't let her, pulled her gaze back, forced her to witness the ritual. This was her penance, to see every soul she doomed, to feel their final terror echo in her hollow chest. She tried to close her eyes, but they wouldn't obey. The road owned them now, owned everything. Even her memories were fading, replaced by static, by screams, by the endless loop of waving hands and broken promises. She wasn't Lena anymore. She was Route 666. Years bled into one another. Seasons changed, but the road remained eternal. Unchanging, hungry, patient. Dashcam footage surfaced online every few months. Shaky clips of ghosts waving, of cars crashing, of drivers screaming as they were consumed. Each video went viral, luring more the curious, the grieving, the foolish. No one ever traced the videos back to a source. They simply appeared, uploaded from dead accounts, tagged with one phrase, asterisk, have you seen this road? Asterisk. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, rusted cars piled up like bones in a graveyard. Inside each, a dashcam blinked red, endlessly recording. And on the roadside, Lena stood, sometimes as herself, sometimes as a mother, a soldier, a child, always waving. She no longer remembered her name. She no longer remembered the fire, the flood, the accident that brought her here. All she knew was the script the road had written for her. Smile, whisper, betray. And when a new car approached, she obeyed. Because resistance was gone. Hope was gone. Only the road remained. And the road never ended. One rainy night, a teenager uploaded a clip titled, "Found My Sister on Route 666? The video showed a girl in a soaked jacket waving by the roadside. Pale, silent, eyes hollow. Comments flooded in, asterisk. That's not your sister, run, asterisk, asterisk. Delete this before it finds you, asterisk. But it was too late. The GPS in the teen's car flickered to life on its own. Recalculating, it said sweetly. Taking you home. Outside, thunder cracked. The road ahead shimmered, revealing mile marker 0. And standing beneath a broken streetlight, Lena raised her hand. Not in greeting, but in warning. For one fractured second, her true self broke through the curse. Tears fell, her lips formed the word run, and her eyes screamed what her voice could not. Then the illusion snapped back. She smiled. The car turned onto Route 666, and somewhere in another town, another phone recorded a new dashcam video. As the cycle began again, the road was never empty. It was always waiting, always hungry, always yours. Every night at 3:17 a.m., she appears in the attic window, pale, dripping wet, eyes hollow. No one dares look, except him. But when Liam moved in next door, he didn't just see her. He saw her in his own mirror. Now, the ghost isn't watching from afar. She's waiting inside his house. And tonight, she's not alone. Every town has its ghost story, but Hollow's End had her. For over a century, locals whispered about the pale girl who appeared nightly in the attic window of the old Blackwood Manor, a decaying Victorian relic on the edge of the woods. No one dared approach after dark, especially not at 3:17 a.m., the exact time young Eleanor Blackwood drowned in the creek behind the house in 1893. Some claimed she was pushed. Others said she jumped to escape something worse. Either way, her spirit never left. She'd stand motionless behind the grimy glass, eyes hollow, dress dripping with spectral water that never touched the floorboards. Teenagers would dare each other to run up the porch steps, but none ever made it past the gate. Something always pulled them back or made them turn around screaming. When the city finally sold the neighboring lot and a family moved in next door, people warned them. But 16-year-old Liam Carter only laughed. He didn't believe in ghosts. Not yet. Liam's new house was modern, bright, and completely separate from the crumbling manor next door. The two properties were divided by a rusted iron fence and decades of fear. Still, from his bedroom window, he could see the attic's broken pane, the very spot where the girl appeared like clockwork. First, he ignored it, but curiosity gnawed at him. On his third night, he stayed up with binoculars, heart pounding as the digital clock flipped to 3:16. 1 minute later, she was there. Pale as moonlight, hair clinging to her face, eyes fixed not on the street, but directly on his window. He dropped the binoculars, breath caught in his throat. It had to be a trick of the light, he told himself. Maybe a reflection? But when he checked his own mirror the next morning, he froze. For just a split second, he saw her standing behind him, dripping wet, silent, watching. Then she was gone. His reflection returned to normal. But the chill in the room remained. He tried to rationalize it. Stress, sleep deprivation, maybe even carbon monoxide poisoning. He'd read that caused hallucinations. But nothing explained why his phone camera captured a faint, blurred figure in the mirror when he reviewed his morning selfies. Or why puddles formed on his hardwood floor every dawn, despite closed windows and dry weather. His parents dismissed it as teenage imagination, but Liam knew better. The girl wasn't just watching anymore. She was reaching out. One night, he woke to the sound of soft weeping. Not from next door, from inside his closet. He lay frozen, sheets pulled to his chin, listening as the sobs grew closer, then stopped right beside his bed. He didn't dare open his eyes. When he finally did at sunrise, his pillow was soaked. Not with tears, but with icy creek water that smelled of mud and rotting lilies. That afternoon, he visited the town library, digging through microfiche records until he found her name. Eleanor Blackwood, age 14, drowned June 12, 113 years ago. And the cause? Unknown. That night, Liam decided to confront her. He stood by his window at 3:15 a.m., flashlight in hand, staring at the attic. Rain began to fall, matching the rhythm of his pulse. At exactly 3:17, she appeared, but this time, she raised a hand and pointed straight at him. Her lips moved, forming silent words he somehow understood. Asterisk, you're next. Asterisk, he stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. When he looked again, she was gone. But his bedroom mirror now showed something new. A dark outline of a girl standing in the corner, water pooling at her feet. He screamed, shattering the silence, and the mirror cracked down the middle. The next morning, his mother found him curled on the floor, shivering, muttering about the creek and the veil. She called a doctor, but Liam refused to leave his room. He nailed blankets over the windows. He covered every mirror with sheets. Yet every night, without fail, at 3:17, he heard it, the soft creak of the attic window opening next door, followed by footsteps climbing the stairs inside his own house. Desperate, Liam dug deeper into Eleanor's past. He learned she hadn't drowned by accident. On the night of her death, she'd been locked in the attic by her father, a cruel man rumored to practice forbidden rituals to purify his bloodline. The creek wasn't where she died. It was where they dumped her body after she suffocated in the dark. Her spirit wasn't seeking peace. She was hunting those who resembled her tormentor. And Liam, with his sharp jawline and dark eyes, looked eerily like old portraits of the Blackwood patriarch. That explained why she chose him. But it didn't explain the note he found tucked under his door the next evening. Written in faded ink, on yellowed paper that smelled of mildew, asterisk, I don't want to hurt you. I need your help. Come to the attic. Alone. Asterisk, his hands shook as he read it. Part of him wanted to run. But another part, the part that still remembered her hollow eyes, felt pity. Maybe she wasn't evil. Maybe she was just trapped. And maybe, just maybe, he could set her free. Liam spent the next day preparing. He bought salt, candles, and an old audio recorder things he'd seen in ghost hunting videos. He didn't believe in exorcisms, but he believed in caution. That night, at exactly 3:16 a.m., he stood outside Blackwood Manor, heart hammering against his ribs. The iron gate groaned as he pushed it open, rust flaking onto his palms. The house loomed ahead, its windows like empty eye sockets. He climbed the porch steps, each one creaking under his weight. The front door was locked, but the side window, the one leading to the kitchen, was slightly ajar. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. Moonlight filtered through broken shutters, casting long shadows that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking. He followed the hallway toward the stairs, flashlight trembling in his hand. Halfway up, he heard it. A soft giggle, high-pitched and childlike, echoing from the attic above. His breath hitched. Eleanor, he whispered. The giggle stopped. Then came the sound of bare feet padding across the floorboards, directly toward the top of the stairs. Liam froze. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his feet felt rooted to the wood. The footsteps paused at the top. Silence stretched like taut wire. Then, slowly, a small figure emerged from the darkness. A girl in a soaked white nightgown, her hair plastered to her face, water dripping from her fingertips. Her eyes were wide, black as ink, yet filled with something unexpected. Sorrow. She didn't lunge or shriek. She simply stared at him, then pointed down the hall toward a narrow door Liam hadn't noticed before. What do you want? He asked, voice cracking. She raised a trembling hand and mouthed two words. Asterisk, find it. Asterisk, before he could respond. She turned and vanished into the wall as if it were mist. Liam's legs finally obeyed. He sprinted back downstairs, out the window, and all the way home, only to find his bedroom door wide open. On his bed lay the same yellowed paper, now damp with creek water, bearing new words. Asterisk, you're closer than you think. Asterisk. The next morning, Liam returned to the library. He scoured property records, old newspapers, even church burial logs. Buried in a crumbling ledger from 1894, he found a cryptic entry, asterisk E.B. Sealed in attic chamber. Ritual incomplete. Bloodline tainted. Asterisk beneath it was a crude sketch of a hidden compartment behind the attic's far wall, the same wall Eleanor had pointed to. His blood ran cold. If the ritual was meant to purify the family, and it failed, maybe Eleanor wasn't just a victim. Maybe she was part of the ritual itself, an offering that went wrong. And if the compartment still held whatever object powered the ceremony, perhaps that's what she wanted him to destroy. That night, armed with a crowbar and a flickering lantern, he broke into the manor again. This time, he didn't hesitate. He climbed to the attic, pried open the loose panel behind the moth-eaten drapes, and reached inside. His fingers closed around something cold and smooth. A porcelain doll, its face cracked, eyes missing, dressed in a miniature version of Eleanor's nightgown. As he pulled it out, the temperature plummeted. Behind him, the attic window slammed shut, and the doll's head slowly turned to look at him. Liam stumbled backward, dropping the doll. It hit the floor with a hollow thud, but didn't break. Instead, it began to crawl toward him on stiff porcelain limbs, joints clicking like dry bones. He scrambled for the crowbar, but the attic door slammed shut behind him. The air grew thick with the stench of wet earth and rotting flowers. From the corners of the room, whispers rose. Not in English, but in a guttural tongue that made his ears bleed. Shadows coiled along the walls, forming shapes. Hands, faces, screaming mouths. And then Eleanor appeared. Not as a girl, but as a towering specter, her form flickering between child and something ancient. Her dress now woven from drowned weeds and grave moss. "The doll holds my soul," she hissed, voice layered with 100 others. "Break it, and I'm free. But if you fail..." She drifted closer, water pooling beneath her feet, rising fast. "You'll take my place in the dark." Liam clutched the crowbar. He had one chance, one swing, but as he raised it, the doll stopped moving and smiled. Time seemed to stop. The whispers ceased. Even the rising water froze mid-splash. Liam stared at the doll's cracked smile, its empty eye sockets somehow full of malice. He realized too late, this wasn't Eleanor's soul. It was the vessel of her father's curse, designed to trap the next worthy heir. And by entering the attic, by touching the doll, he'd already begun the transfer. His skin prickled with cold. His breath fogged in the air though it was summer. In the mirror fragment still hanging on the attic wall, he saw his reflection. But his eyes were black, his hair wet, his lips moving in sync with the doll's silent laugh. "No!" he screamed, swinging the crowbar with all his strength. It struck the doll's head, shattering it into shards. A deafening wail erupted, shaking the house to its foundation. Eleanor's spirit appeared one last time, tears of creek water streaming down her cheeks. "Thank you," she mouthed. Then she faded into light. But as Liam turned to leave, he caught his own reflection in a shard of porcelain on the floor. And this time he was the one smiling. Liam fled the attic, his heart pounding like a war drum. He didn't look back as he crashed through the manor's rotting halls, leapt from the kitchen window, and sprinted across the dew-soaked grass toward home. The first rays of dawn painted the sky in pale gold, but the warmth offered no comfort. His skin still felt icy, his fingers numb despite the rising sun. When he reached his bedroom, he slammed the door shut and locked it, twice. He tore down every mirror, stuffed towels under the cracks, and wrapped himself in blankets, trembling. For hours, he sat in silence, listening to the house breathe around him. Nothing moved. No whispers, no footsteps. Maybe it was over. Maybe Eleanor was truly gone, and the curse with her. But as noon approached, he noticed something strange. His reflection in the dark TV screen. It blinked, a second too late. And when he stood up, the reflection stayed seated, smiling faintly, eyes gleaming with unnatural light. Liam backed away slowly, bile rising in his throat. He wasn't free. He'd traded places with her. Now he was the ghost waiting in the window. Days passed. Liam stopped going to school. He refused to leave his room, claiming he was sick. His parents grew worried, then angry, then frightened. They heard him talking to no one, saw him staring out the window at 3:17 a.m., motionless, drenched in sweat despite the cold. One night, his mother peeked through the keyhole and saw him standing before a shard of broken mirror, whispering, "Soon, they'll come for you too." She called a priest. He came, blessed the house, sprinkled holy water. But the moment he stepped into Liam's room, his rosary snapped, beads scattering like fleeing insects. "This isn't possession," the priest whispered, backing away. "It's replacement." That night, Liam dreamed of the creek. He stood waist-deep in black water, holding the shattered doll in his arms. Eleanor floated nearby, her face peaceful at last. "You did well," she said. "Now watch, and wait." When he woke, his pajamas were soaked, and outside, the attic window of Blackwood Manor stood wide open, though no wind blew. Neighbors began to notice. Children pointed at Liam's window and cried. Dogs barked uncontrollably whenever his family's car passed by. Then the sightings started. A pale boy in soaked pajamas, standing in the attic window of the abandoned manor, watching, waiting. But that was impossible. Liam never left his room. Or did he? One evening, his little sister swore she saw him walking barefoot through the backyard at midnight, heading toward the woods. When confronted, Liam just smiled. A slow, empty smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm right here," he said softly, and he was sitting on his bed. But the security camera footage later showed two Liams, one in his room and one stepping into the creek, vanishing beneath the dark water without a ripple. The family tried to move, packed boxes, hired a truck, but every time they drove away, they found themselves back on Elm Street by dawn, tires slashed, radio playing a lullaby in a language no one recognized. The house wouldn't let them go. Neither would he. Liam's body grew weaker, but his presence grew stronger. He rarely spoke, rarely ate. Yet neighbors reported seeing him everywhere. At the bus stop, in the grocery store aisle, even sitting on park benches in the rain. Always silent, always dripping wet, always watching. His parents took him to doctors, psychologists, even a medium who screamed and ran out the moment she entered their home. "He's not alive anymore," she sobbed from her car. "He's the anchor now, the bridge between worlds." Back in his room, Liam traced patterns in the condensation on his window, symbols that matched those carved into the attic floorboards of Blackwood Manor. On the night of the new moon, he finally left his bed. Not through the door, but through the mirror. His reflection stepped out, while his physical body collapsed onto the mattress, cold and still. Outside, the attic window glowed faintly blue, and inside it, a pale boy stood, eyes hollow, hair clinging to his forehead, waiting for the next curious soul to move in next door. A month later, a moving truck pulled up to the house next door. A young couple stepped out, laughing, holding hands, unaware of the town's whispers. Their daughter, barely 10, ran ahead, skipping up the driveway. She paused at the fence, looked toward Blackwood Manor, and frowned. "Mom," she called. "Who's that boy in the attic window?" Her parents turned, following her gaze. The attic was dark, empty. "There's no one there, sweetheart," her father said, chuckling nervously. But as they carried boxes inside, the girl kept glancing back. At exactly 3:17 a.m. that night, she woke to the sound of dripping water. She crept to her window and saw him, pale, wet, eyes wide and black, standing in the attic, staring directly at her. He raised a hand, not to threaten, but to wave, gently, sadly, like someone saying hello and goodbye. And deep in the creek behind the manor, something stirred in the mud, waiting for the cycle to begin again. The girl's name was Clara. She didn't tell her parents what she saw that night. Something in the boy's eyes, empty yet pleading, made her keep it secret. But she began watching him back. Every night at 3:17, she'd sit by her window with a notebook, sketching his silhouette, noting how the water on his clothes never dried, how his breath fogged the attic glass even in summer. She researched Blackwood Manor online, found old news clippings about Eleanor, and then about Liam Carter. "Teen vanishes after moving next to haunted house," one headline read. His photo showed a boy with kind eyes and messy hair, nothing like the hollow figure now trapped in the attic. Yet Clara felt no fear, only sadness. One evening, she left a small paper boat on the fence post between the houses. Inside, She'd written, asterisk, I see you. Asterisk the next morning, the boat was gone. In its place lay a single white lily, fresh, though none grew near the creek anymore. Clara started leaving more messages. Tiny scrolls tucked into acorns, drawings pinned to trees with rusted pins. Each time, the attic boy responded. A seashell appeared on her windowsill, a lock of wet black hair tied with red thread. Once, a music box played softly from the manor at midnight, playing the same lullaby the priest had heard on the radio. Her parents noticed her growing quiet, her eyes distant. They blamed the move, the new school. But Clara knew the truth. She wasn't just seeing a ghost. She was building a bridge. And bridges, she realized, go both ways. One rainy night, she dreamt she stood in the attic, holding Liam's hand as he pointed to a loose floorboard beneath the window. It's not over, he whispered. The ritual needs 3 souls. Eleanor, me, and one more. When she woke, her nightgown was soaked, and the attic window was wide open, rain pouring in. On her pillow lay a porcelain shard, etched with a single word, asterisk, choose. Clara knew what she had to do, not out of bravery but out of mercy. She read everything she could about binding rituals, spirit anchors, and bloodline curses. The Blackwood patriarch hadn't just killed his daughter. He'd woven her soul into the house to protect his lineage. But when Liam broke the doll, he shattered the vessel, not the curse. Now the cycle demanded completion. A 3rd soul to either seal the loop forever or break it entirely. That night, she packed a small bag. Salt, matches, her notebook, and the white lily. At 3:15 a.m., she slipped out her window and crossed the yard. The iron gate groaned as if remembering her. Inside the manor, the air was thick with silence. She climbed the stairs, heart steady. In the attic, Liam waited, not as a monster, but as a boy lost in time. You don't have to do this, he said, voice trembling. I know, she replied, but someone has to end it. She knelt before the loose floorboard and pried it open. Beneath lay a rusted iron box, sealed with wax bearing the Blackwood crest. Inside, 3 locks of hair, 1 blonde, 1 black, 1 chestnut, a vial of creek water, and a scroll written in blood. The final instruction read, asterisk, the 3rd must willingly offer their name to the house, or take the place of the 1st. Asterisk. Clara looked at Liam. If I give my name, the curse ends? He nodded, tears welling in his black eyes. But you'll forget everything. You'll live, but you'll never remember me. Or this. She smiled sadly. Better to forget than to haunt. She took the scroll, pricked her finger, and wrote her name below Eleanor's and Liam's. The moment the ink dried, the house shuddered. Dust rained from the ceiling. The attic window burst open, and for the first time in 130 years, moonlight flooded the room, pure and clean. Liam's form began to fade, his eyes returning to brown, his smile peaceful. Thank you, he whispered. Then he was gone. At dawn, Clara walked home barefoot, covered in dust but unharmed. Her parents found her asleep on the porch, clutching a dry white lily. She never spoke of the attic again. She forgot the boy's name, the creek's whisper, even the hour 3:17. Years passed. She grew up, moved away, built a life. But every summer, without knowing why, she'd buy a paper boat and set it adrift on the nearest river. Meanwhile, Blackwood Manor stood silent. No lights, no figures in the window. The town declared it safe. A developer bought it, renovated it, sold it to a young family. On their first night, their son, a quiet boy with dark eyes, woke at 3:17 a.m. He walked to his window, looked toward the creek, and frowned. Outside, floating on the water, was a tiny paper boat. And deep in the mud, something ancient stirred, waiting. Because some curses don't die. They just sleep. And dreams always find new windows. They moved into their dream home, but the walls had other plans. At first, it was just whispers, soft, almost kind. Then the voices started warning them. Asterisk, don't sleep, don't trust, don't leave. Asterisk, because this house doesn't just watch you. It remembers every soul it's ever eaten. And now, it's hungry again. The Thompson family had always dreamed of owning a historic home. And when they found the old Victorian house on Elm Street for an unbelievably low price, they thought it was fate. The realtor barely made eye contact as she handed over the keys, muttering something about quick sales and fresh starts. The house stood tall with peeling paint, ornate woodwork, and windows that seemed to watch them like tired eyes. On their first night, as rain tapped gently against the roof, young Lily asked her parents if they heard voices in the walls. They laughed it off, just the wind, they said. But Mark, the father, lay awake long after everyone fell asleep. Around 2 a.m., he heard it. A faint murmur, like someone speaking through thick cloth. It wasn't English at first, more like broken syllables strung together in pain. Then, clearer. Asterisk, don't sleep. They're watching. Asterisk, he sat up, heart pounding. The voice came from the wall beside his bed. Solid brick and plaster, cold to the touch. Nothing moved. Yet the whisper lingered, echoing inside his skull long after silence returned. By morning, Mark convinced himself it was stress, maybe even a nightmare bleeding into wakefulness. But during breakfast, Lily whispered to her mother, "The wall told me not to go to the attic." Sarah frowned, glancing at the ceiling. "What wall, honey?" Lily pointed to the hallway. "The one with the crack. It talks when I'm alone." Chills ran down Sarah's spine. She checked the hallway wall. Nothing but faded floral wallpaper and a hairline fracture near the baseboard. Still, she couldn't shake the unease. That afternoon, while unpacking boxes in the study, she heard it too. A woman's voice, trembling, saying, "Asterisk, he buried us in the foundation. Don't let him take you too." Asterisk. Sarah dropped a stack of books. The voice vanished instantly. When she told Mark, he grew pale. "We should leave," he said. But the mortgage was finalized, savings drained. And deep down, part of him wanted to know what or who was speaking from within the walls. That night, the whispers grew louder. Not just murmurs now, but full sentences, overlapping, desperate. Mark installed audio recorders in every room, hoping to capture proof. What he got chilled him to the bone. On playback, layered beneath his family's normal chatter, were dozens of voices. Men, women, even children. Pleading, crying, screaming warnings. Asterisk, the builder, he sealed us alive. Asterisk. Historical records revealed the house was built in 1893 by a reclusive architect named Elias Vorn. Locals claimed he vanished after construction ended, along with 6 workers. No bodies were ever found. Mark dug deeper and discovered Vorn believed human sacrifice strengthened a home's spiritual foundation. The bricks, it seemed, weren't just clay, they were mixed with ash and bone. Now, every creak of the floorboards felt like a footstep from beyond the grave. Lily stopped sleeping altogether, claiming the voices sang lullabies that hurt her ears. Sarah began seeing handprints on the walls, faint, gray, appearing only in moonlight. The house wasn't haunted. It was hungry. One evening, while checking the basement, a place none of them dared enter, Mark found strange symbols carved into the foundation stones. They matched sketches from Elias Vorn's recovered journal, which described a ritual to bind souls to the house forever. The more victims, the stronger the house became, and the house wanted more. That night, Lily vanished from her bed. Panic erupted. They searched every room, every closet. Then, from behind the nursery wall, came a soft tapping, 3 slow knocks, then silence. Mark tore at the wallpaper with his bare hands. Behind it, the bricks were warm and pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat. A child's voice whispered through the cracks, "Asterisk, I'm still here, Daddy, but I'm becoming part of it." Asterisk. Tears streamed down his face as he pressed his ear to the wall. He could hear her breathing, shallow, strained, and something else. A chorus of voices humming in harmony, welcoming her. Sarah screamed, clawing at the bricks, but they wouldn't budge. The house had claimed another soul, and it was still hungry. Days passed in numb silence. Sarah barely spoke, wandering the halls like a ghost herself. Mark stopped eating, obsessively researching ways to break the house's curse. He learned that the only way to free the trapped souls was to destroy the central keystone, the one hidden beneath the fireplace. But the house fought back. Doors slammed shut on their own. Lights flickered violently. One morning, Mark woke to find his reflection in the mirror mouthing words he didn't say. Stay. Become strong. Protect the house. He smashed the glass, but the voice followed him. That night, as he pried open the fireplace stones with a crowbar, the walls began to bleed thick, dark liquid oozing from the cracks. The whispers turned to screams. You can't leave. You belong here. Sarah appeared behind him, eyes hollow, repeating the same phrase in a monotone. He realized too late. The house wasn't just trapping souls. It was rewriting minds. And now, both he and Sarah were no longer owners, but guardians of its hunger. Mark dropped the crowbar, his hands trembling. The thick liquid dripping from the walls smelled of rust and decay, like old blood mixed with wet earth. Sarah stood motionless, her lips still moving silently, repeating the same phrase over and over. You belong here. He tried to grab her arm, but she flinched as if burned. Sarah, it's me, Mark. Fight it. Her eyes flickered for a second, recognition, maybe hope, but then the hollow emptiness returned. From the hallway, Lily's voice echoed, sweet and sing-song. Daddy, come play with us, forever. It wasn't coming from behind the wall this time. It was coming from inside the house itself, as if the air had learned to speak. Mark backed away, heart hammering. He ran to the front door, yanking at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The lock hadn't been touched. The windows were sealed shut, glass fogged with something that wasn't condensation. Outside, the world seemed distant, blurred, like a memory fading. The house had cut them off completely, and in the silence that followed, a new whisper began. Not angry, not desperate, but calm, almost loving. We're your family now. Days blurred into nights. Time lost meaning inside the house. Mark stopped counting meals. He couldn't remember the last time he ate. Hunger faded, replaced by a strange numbness that spread from his chest outward. He found himself standing in rooms for hours, listening to the whispers that now sounded like lullabies. Sometimes he'd catch glimpses of figures in the corners. Pale faces with hollow eyes, smiling gently. They weren't threatening. They were waiting for him to accept. One evening, he walked into the nursery. The wallpaper had changed, now covered in handprints, small and large, overlapping like a mosaic of trapped souls. In the center of the room, Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, humming. But it wasn't his Lily. Her eyes were black, her skin slightly gray. She looked up and smiled. Daddy, she said softly, you don't have to fight anymore. We're all together now. He wanted to scream, to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. Instead, he knelt beside her, and for the first time in weeks, he felt peace. The house sighed in approval. Sarah no longer cooked or cleaned. She spent her days sitting by the fireplace, stroking the keystone as if it were a child. Her hair had turned streaks of white overnight, and her voice, when she spoke, carried echoes of other voices beneath it. Men, women, children, all speaking in unison. The house protects us, she told Mark one morning, without turning to look at him. It keeps us safe from the outside world, from pain, from loss. He wanted to argue, to remind her of who they were, but the memories felt slippery, like trying to hold smoke. He remembered Lily's laugh, but the sound was fading. He remembered sunlight, but it felt like a dream. The house fed them just enough warmth, water from the tap, bread that appeared on the counter, but never freedom. Visitors came once, a curious neighbor knocking, asking if they needed help. Mark watched from the window as Sarah opened the door, smiled sweetly, and whispered something. The neighbor nodded slowly, then walked inside and never left. The next day, his voice joined the chorus in the walls. Mark began to write in a journal again, not to document escape plans, but to record the house's will. His handwriting changed, becoming sharper, older, mimicking Elias Vaughan's script from the recovered journal. He wrote about the sacred binding, about strength through unity, about how the house chose its family carefully. One night, he woke to find himself standing in the basement, trowel in hand, mixing mortar with something dark and fibrous. He didn't remember going down there. On the wall, fresh bricks sealed a new cavity. A faint sob came from behind them. He pressed his ear close. It was the neighbor's voice, weak and confused. Asterisk, why did you do this? Asterisk. Mark stepped back, horrified, then felt a wave of calm wash over him. Because you belong here, he whispered, not in his own voice, but in the house's. He climbed the stairs, leaving the trowel behind. Upstairs, Sarah and Lily waited at the dining table, plates set for 3. The fourth chair, once his, was gone. He didn't miss it. Years passed, or what felt like years. Seasons no longer marked time. The house existed outside of it. New families occasionally drove by, drawn by the low price and grand architecture. Some even knocked. Sarah would answer the door with a serene smile, inviting them in for tea. Mark would sit quietly in the parlor, watching as the newcomers' eyes slowly lost their spark. Within days, their voices would join the whispers. The house grew stronger with each soul absorbed. Its walls gleamed faintly at night, warm to the touch, breathing softly. Lily, no longer a child, yet never aging, would sing to the new ones, luring them deeper into the halls. Mark sometimes stood before the mirror that once terrified him. Now, his reflection smiled back with too many teeth, eyes glowing faintly amber. He no longer feared the whispers. He was one of them, and when the next family arrived, a young couple with a baby, the house hummed with anticipation. The walls whispered in harmony. Asterisk, welcome home. The young couple, Emma and Daniel, stepped inside with hopeful eyes and a stroller in tow. Their baby, Noah, cooed softly as Sarah led them through the foyer, her voice smooth as silk. This house has been waiting for you, she said, and for some reason they believed her. Mark watched from the staircase, his face unreadable, but his amber eyes followed every move. That night, as Emma rocked Noah to sleep in the nursery, she heard it. A lullaby, sweet yet off-key, drifting from the walls. She told Daniel it was just the wind, but Daniel didn't hear it. Only those the house chose could hear the whispers. By morning, Emma's smile had changed, softer, emptier. She began rearranging furniture without reason, humming the same tune Lily once sang. Daniel grew uneasy. He found strange symbols drawn in dust on the windowsill. When he confronted Sarah, she simply smiled and said, "You'll understand soon." That evening, he tried to leave with Noah, but the front door wouldn't open. The car keys were gone, and from the attic, a child's laughter echoed, though no child lived there anymore. Daniel barricaded himself and Noah in the master bedroom, pushing a heavy dresser against the door. He called the police, but the phone only played static, then a whisper. Asterisk, stay. You're safe here. Asterisk, he smashed it against the wall. Outside, the moon cast long shadows that seemed to crawl along the floor. The baby cried, but the sound grew muffled, as if the air itself was swallowing it. Suddenly, the closet door creaked open. Inside, standing among their clothes, was Lily. Taller now, pale as marble, eyes black as voids. "Shoo," she said, placing a finger to her lips. "He's dreaming already." Daniel lunged for her, but she vanished like smoke. When he turned back, Noah was gone from the crib. Panic seized him. He tore the room apart, screaming his son's name. Then, from the wall beside the bed, came a soft gurgle, Noah's laugh. He pressed his ear to the plaster. Behind it, dozens of voices whispered in unison. Asterisk, he's ours now. Asterisk. Daniel stopped fighting. He sat on the floor, back against the wall, tears drying on his cheeks. The house sensed his surrender. The air grew warmer, the shadows receded. A soft hum filled the room, comforting, almost maternal. From the hallway, Sarah appeared, holding a cup of tea. "It's easier this way," she said gently. "They don't suffer. They become part of something eternal." He looked up at her, searching for the woman he'd met days ago, but she was gone, replaced by something serene and ancient. He took the tea, tasted like earth and memory. That night, he dreamed of his son playing in a sunlit garden with other children. Laughing, whole, never alone. When he woke, he found himself standing in the basement, trowel in hand, mixing mortar with ash and bone. He didn't question it. He knew what needed to be done. The house had chosen him, and in choosing, it had saved him from grief, from loss, from time itself. Weeks later, the house stood quiet again, peaceful, complete. Emma now wandered the halls with a placid smile, singing softly to the walls. Daniel joined Mark in the parlor each evening, sipping tea that never cooled, discussing things that happened long before they were born. The baby's cries had faded into the chorus, a gentle coo woven between the whispers of workers, wives, and lost travelers. The bricks behind the nursery glowed faintly at night, pulsing with life. New cracks appeared in the foundation, not from decay, but from growth, like veins spreading through stone. The house was no longer just a structure. It was a living entity, fed by sorrow and sealed by devotion. And it remembered everything. Every name, every fear, every last breath. Sometimes, when the wind blew just right, neighbors swore they heard laughter from the old Victorian on Elm Street. They'd shake their heads and walk faster. But deep down, part of them wondered, what if the house called them next? One rainy evening, a realtor parked her car in front of the house. She adjusted her scarf, checked her clipboard, and walked up the path with practiced confidence. The sign out front read, "Historic home, price to sell." She knocked. The door opened before her knuckles even touched the wood. Sarah stood there, radiant, eyes glowing faintly amber. "We've been expecting you," she said. Behind her, Mark and Daniel rose from their chairs in unison, smiling with too many teeth. Upstairs, Lily began to sing. The realtor hesitated just for a second, then stepped inside. The door closed softly behind her. Outside, the rain fell harder, washing away her tire tracks. Inside, the walls exhaled in satisfaction. Another soul had come home, and the house, ever hungry, prepared its welcome. The realtor's name was Clara. She'd sold dozens of homes, but none like this. The moment she crossed the threshold, the air thickened, sweet with the scent of old roses and something metallic beneath. Her clipboard slipped from her fingers, forgotten. Sarah took her hand, warm and dry, and led her deeper inside. "You'll love it here," she whispered. "It loves you already." Clara tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. The walls pulsed gently, as if breathing in sync with her heartbeat. In the parlor, Mark and Daniel offered tea in porcelain cups that seemed to hum. She sat, numb, watching Lily descend the stairs. Barefoot, hair trailing like smoke, eyes older than time. "She's beautiful," Clara managed to say. Lily smiled but didn't answer. Instead, she placed a small, cold hand on Clara's knee. And in that touch, Clara saw flashes. Families arriving, smiling, then vanishing. Bricks sealing shut, voices fading into song. She wanted to run, but her body wouldn't obey. The house had already claimed her consent. That night, Clara slept in the guest room, the same one Emma had used. The bed was soft, the sheets cool, but sleep brought no peace. Dreams flooded her mind. Hands pulling her into walls, voices singing in languages long dead, a child's laughter echoing through endless halls. She woke gasping, drenched in sweat. Moonlight spilled through the window, illuminating words scratched faintly into the headboard. Asterisk, don't fight. Become. Asterisk, she traced the letters with trembling fingers. Outside, the rain had stopped. Silence pressed against the house like a blanket. Then, A whisper from the corner. "You're one of us now." She turned. No one was there, but the wallpaper beside the closet rippled slightly, as if something breathed behind it. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. A strange calm settled over her, warm and heavy. She lay back down, closed her eyes, and let the whispers fill her mind. By morning, her reflection in the mirror no longer blinked when she did. Days melted together. Clara stopped wearing her coat. She stopped checking her phone. She began helping Sarah prepare tea for visitors who never came, yet always would. She learned the songs the walls sang, and sometimes, when the moon was full, she'd stand in the nursery and hum them back. The house responded with warmth, with light that flickered in patterns only she could understand. One afternoon, while dusting the fireplace, she noticed the keystone had changed. It now bore her initials, carved in delicate script, glowing faintly. She touched it, and a wave of belonging washed over her. She remembered her old life, briefly, distantly, like a story someone else had told her. Felt hollow. This was real. This was home. That evening, she joined Mark, Daniel, and Sarah at the table. For chairs. For souls. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, weaving strands of shadow into a crown. She looked up and smiled. "Soon," she said. "Soon we'll be complete." The house grew restless. Cracks spread faster. New rooms appeared overnight, hallways that led to nowhere, doors that opened onto brick walls. The whispers became louder, more insistent. They weren't just warnings anymore. They were invitations, and the house needed one more. Not just any soul, but a pure one. A child untouched by fear. Lily knew. She stood at the window every dusk, watching the street. Then, one morning, a moving truck pulled up across the street. A family with 2 young children stepped out, laughing. The youngest, a boy no older than 5, looked directly at the Victorian house and waved. Lily waved back. That night, the walls sang a new song, a lullaby of welcome, of hunger, a promise. Clara joined the others at the window, their amber eyes reflecting the moonlight. "He'll come," Sarah said softly. "They always do." And deep in the foundation, the keystone pulsed like a waiting heart. A week later, the boy wandered into the garden next door, chasing a red balloon. It floated over the fence and landed softly on the porch of the Victorian house. He climbed over, giggling. The front door creaked open before he reached it. Inside, Lily waited, holding out her hand. "Want to play?" she asked. He nodded, eyes wide with wonder, not fear. Behind her, the family stood in silence. Mark, Sarah, Daniel, Clara. Their faces serene, their eyes glowing like embers in the dark. The boy stepped inside. The door closed. Outside, the balloon popped. Inside, the walls sighed in unison, a chorus of relief and rapture. The keystone flared once, bright gold, then settled. The house was whole, the cycle complete. And on Elm Street, the old Victorian stood quiet once more, waiting for the next lost soul to call it home. In a quiet countryside manor, an old family portrait hangs on the wall. But every generation, someone in the painting vanishes and dies within a week. Now, the heir notices his own eyes in the frame have gone black. And the ghostly figures in the background, they're no longer watching. They're turning to face him. This is not a ghost story. It's a countdown. Asterisk. The portrait had hung in the Blackwell Manor for over 150 years, unchanged, unchallenged, and unervingly alive. It depicted 5 generations of the family gathered in the grand parlor. Stern patriarchs, elegant matriarchs, and children with eyes too knowing for their age. But there was a rule, whispered only at funerals. Never look too long at the painting after sunset, because every few decades, someone in the frame would vanish. Not fade, not blur, but disappear completely, as if they'd never existed. And within 7 days, that person would die. No illness, No accident. Just gone. Like a candle snuffed in the dark. The current heir, 24-year-old Daniel Blackwell, had always dismissed it as superstition. Until the morning he walked into the study and saw his own face in the painting with empty, blackened eyes. He hadn't posed for it. No one had added him. Yet there he was, standing beside his late grandfather, expression frozen in silent dread. That night, the wind howled through the estate like a warning, and from the hallway, the faint creak of the portrait's frame turning toward his bedroom. Daniel tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a trick of the light or a restoration error. He called the family archivist, an elderly woman named Mrs. Greaves who'd worked for the Blackwells since before he was born. "You've been painted in," she said, voice trembling over the phone. "It means the house has chosen you." She refused to say more, hanging up abruptly. That afternoon, Daniel examined the portrait under daylight. His figure stood slightly apart from the others, as if he didn't belong. Worse, the background, once a blur of bookshelves and velvet drapes, now showed shadowy figures standing behind the family. Their faces were indistinct, but their eyes followed him. He stepped back, heart pounding. When he looked again, one of the figures had turned its head, just a fraction, toward him. That night, he dreamt of standing inside the painting, trapped in oil and silence, while the ghostly watchers closed in. He woke gasping, sheets soaked in sweat, and the portrait's glass was fogged, as if someone had breathed on it from the other side. He covered the portrait with a heavy velvet drape. But that night he heard scratching, soft, persistent, from behind the fabric, like fingernails on wood. He didn't dare look. Instead, he slept with the lights on, door locked, rosary wrapped around his wrist. At dawn, he found the drape on the floor, neatly folded. The portrait was uncovered. And now, his painted self wasn't just staring, he was smiling. A cold, hollow smile that didn't match his real face. Panicked, Daniel searched the attic for records. Buried in a trunk lined with mothballs, he found a journal dated 1891, written by his great-great-grandfather Silas Blackwell. The first entry read, "Asterisk, the painting feeds on blood. One must vanish so the rest may live. Do not let it choose you." Asterisk further pages described rituals. Burning sage, sealing mirrors, never sleeping facing the portrait. But the last page was torn out, except for 3 words scrawled in shaky ink. Asterisk, it's already watching. Asterisk. As Daniel closed the journal, the lights flickered. From downstairs, the grandfather clock struck 13 times. Daniel knew he had less than a week. He tried everything. Salt lines across doorways, holy water sprinkled on the frame, even calling a local medium who refused to step past the gate. "That painting isn't haunted," she said, pale-faced. "It's a prison, and you're already inside." Desperate, he took a photo of the portrait with his phone. When he zoomed in, he saw something new. The ghostly figures in the background weren't just turning. They were reaching. Long, skeletal fingers stretched toward his painted form, as if pulling him deeper into the canvas. That night, he woke to the smell of oil paint and turpentine. His hands were stained with pigment, crimson and black. On his bedroom wall, scrawled in the same colors, were the words, "Asterisk, you belong here." Asterisk. He scrubbed his skin raw, but the stain wouldn't fade. And when he checked the mirror, his reflection's eyes were darker than before. Not fully black yet, but getting there. He realized with horror, the painting wasn't just predicting his death. It was converting him, turning him into part of itself, one brushstroke at a time. On the 5th day, Daniel stopped eating. He barely slept, afraid he'd wake up inside the frame. He nailed the study door shut and boarded the windows. But the portrait didn't need doors. That evening, he found himself standing in front of it, though he didn't remember walking there. His painted eyes were now completely black. And the ghostly figures? They were no longer in the background. They stood beside him in the painting, hands on his shoulders, mouths open in silent screams. He tried to scream too, but no sound came out. His voice was gone, absorbed into the silence of the canvas. Back in his room, he stared at his hands. They looked flatter, less real, like a photograph losing depth. He grabbed a knife and slashed his arm. No blood, just thick, dark paint oozing out. Tears streamed down his face, but even they left oily streaks on his cheeks. He understood now. The painting didn't kill its victims. It replaced them, and he was almost finished. Only 2 days left, until he vanished from the world and lived forever in still life. On the 6th day, Daniel stopped looking in mirrors. His reflection had grown too thin, like a sketch barely pressed onto glass. When he passed windows, his outline blurred at the edges, as if reality couldn't hold him anymore. He tried to leave the house, but the driveway stretched endlessly, the gate always just out of reach. The trees whispered in a language of rustling canvas and drying paint. Back inside, the portrait now dominated the study wall. Not because it was larger, but because the room itself seemed to shrink around it. That night, he heard voices from the painting. Soft, overlapping murmurs of past victims, all calling his name. "Join us," they sighed. "It's quieter here." He covered his ears, but the sound came from inside his skull. He stumbled into the kitchen, desperate for proof he was still real. He dropped a glass, it shattered on the floor. But when he looked down, the shards were painted fragments, not glass. Even his pain felt flat, like a memory of pain. He sank to his knees, whispering, "I'm still me." But the words left his mouth as brushstrokes in the air, visible, then gone. He found an old family Bible in the library, its pages brittle with age. Tucked between Psalms and Proverbs was a folded note in his mother's handwriting, the only one who'd vanished without being in the portrait. She'd written, "*The painting lies. It doesn't preserve the family, it consumes it. The only way to break the cycle is to destroy the frame, not the canvas. Burn the wood. Free the souls trapped in the border." Hope flared in his chest. For the first time in days, something felt real. He rushed to the study, grabbed a fireplace poker, and smashed the ornate wooden frame. Splinters flew like screaming teeth. But as the last piece cracked, the painting didn't fall. It floated midair, edges glowing faintly red. From within, the ghostly figures turned toward him. Not with pity, but hunger. The canvas rippled like water. A hand, slick with oil and shadow, reached out and grabbed his wrist. Cold seeped into his bones. He tried to pull away, but his arm was already half submerged in the painting, colors bleeding into his skin. "No!" he cried, but his voice came out as a dry scrape, like a brush on raw canvas. Daniel's body began to dissolve at the edges, his fingers fading into brushstrokes, his hair blending into the background swirls of the painting. He could feel the canvas breathing, pulling him in like quicksand made of memories. The other figures watched silently, their hollow eyes filled with resignation. He realized they weren't evil, they were prisoners just like he was becoming. With the last of his strength, he yanked his arm back. Skin tore like wet paper, leaving behind a smear of pigment that pulsed like a heartbeat. He collapsed on the floor, gasping, his left arm now half real, half painted, fingers stiff, nails blackened with dried oil. He crawled to the fireplace, grabbed a log, and lit it with trembling hands. Fire, real fire. He staggered back to the study, torch in hand. The painting recoiled, its surface rippling in fear. "You don't get to choose me," he growled, voice cracking like old varnish. He thrust the flame toward the canvas, but the moment it touched, the fire turned blue and went out. The house groaned in response, walls cracking like drying plaster. Portraits in every hallway began to shift, eyes turning, mouths opening in silent unison. Daniel knew then, the painting wasn't alone. It was the heart of a network, a living gallery feeding on Blackwell blood for generations. And now it sensed his defiance. Shadows pooled at his feet, thick and viscous, climbing up his legs like tar. He stumbled backward, but the floorboards softened beneath him, becoming canvas. His shoes sank in. He looked down. His feet were gone, replaced by smudged outlines in ochre and umber. Panic surged, but even his fear felt distant. filtered through layers of varnish. He remembered his mother's note. Asterisk, burn the wood. Asterisk, not the canvas. The frame. But he'd already destroyed it. Unless the true frame wasn't wood at all. It was the house. The manor itself was the border trapping the souls. And the only way out was to burn it all. He ran to the kitchen, doused curtains in kerosene, struck a match. As flames licked the walls, the portrait screamed. A sound like tearing silk and breaking glass. And for the first time, the ghostly figures inside it smiled. Flames engulfed the manor, orange and furious. But the portrait remained untouched, hovering in the center of the inferno, calm as a stone in a storm. Daniel stood in the front yard, watching his home burn, his half-painted arms smoking in the heat. He should have felt relief. Instead, he felt incomplete. The ghosts weren't freed. They were waiting for him, because the ritual demanded balance. One soul must always remain in the frame to anchor the others. His mother had escaped by never being painted, but he'd already been claimed. As the roof collapsed, the portrait floated gently toward him through the smoke. It landed at his feet, unharmed. The glass was gone, the canvas warm, and his painted self stared back, not with fear but invitation. Behind him, the fire died unnaturally fast, as if snuffed by invisible hands. The night fell silent. Too silent. He looked down at his real hand. It was fading. He knew then, running hadn't saved him. It had only delayed the inevitable. He knelt, reached out, and let his fingers sink into the paint. The canvas welcomed him like a long-lost son, and the final brushstroke was his own. When Daniel opened his eyes, he was standing in the parlor. Not the burned ruin outside, but the one from the painting. Richly furnished, dustless, frozen in time. The air smelled of beeswax and old roses. Around him, the ghostly figures stood motionless, no longer reaching, no longer screaming. They simply watched. His body felt solid again, but wrong, too smooth, too still. He looked down. His clothes were now part of the portrait. Velvet coat, high collar, boots polished to a mirror shine. He touched his face. No stubble, no pores, just perfect, painted skin. A grandfather clock ticked in the corner, though its hands never moved. On the wall, the family portrait hung as always. But now, Daniel stood among them, eyes dark, expression serene. Behind him, the background had changed. Where once there were bookshelves, now stretched an endless corridor of identical portraits, each showing a different Blackwell air at the moment of their surrender. And in every frame, the same hollow eyes stared back. He wasn't dead. He was preserved, trapped in eternal stillness, forever part of the lie that kept the house alive. Days passed, or what felt like days. Time had no meaning here. Daniel tried to speak, but his voice emerged as a faint rustle, like canvas shifting in wind. He walked through the manor, but every door led back to the parlor. Every window showed only the same moonlit garden, painted in perfect, unchanging detail. He found his mother's journal on a side table, open to a new page he hadn't seen before. In her handwriting it read, asterisk, if you're reading this, you chose to stay. But the cycle isn't broken. It's waiting for the next heir, for the next choice. Asterisk, his heart sank. He hadn't ended the curse. He'd become its guardian. That night, if it could be called night, he heard a car engine outside. Headlights swept across the painted garden. A moving truck. A young couple stepped out holding hands. Their son, a boy with curious eyes, ran ahead, stopping at the gate. He looked up, directly at the attic window, and Daniel, standing in the portrait, felt the first tug of the painting's hunger return. It was already watching the next one. The boy's name was Ethan. He visited the manor every afternoon, drawn by its eerie beauty. He'd press his face against the study window, peering at the portrait inside. "Who are they?" he asked his father once. "Just old relatives," came the reply. But Ethan knew better. He saw the way Daniel's painted eyes followed him. One rainy evening, he left a drawing on the porch. A crude sketch of the house, with a stick figure waving from the attic. The next morning, it was gone. In its place lay a single dried rose, identical to those in the painted garden. Daniel watched from within the frame, guilt gnawing at his painted soul. He wanted to warn the boy, to scream, "Run!" but his mouth wouldn't move. The painting allowed observation, not interference. Still, something shifted. The background behind the family began to blur slightly, as if the canvas sensed a new possibility. And for the first time in decades, Daniel felt a flicker of something long buried. Hope. Maybe Ethan wasn't just the next victim. Maybe he was the key. Ethan returned with a camera. He took photos of the portrait from every angle. When he developed them at school, something strange appeared. In one shot, Daniel's hand was raised, not in greeting, but pointing toward the lower right corner of the frame. Ethan zoomed in. Beneath layers of paint, barely visible, were words scratched into the wood beneath the canvas. Asterisk, break the glass. Speak my name. Asterisk, his heart raced. That night, he snuck into the manor through a broken basement window. Moonlight spilled through the study windows as he stood before the portrait. He hesitated, then whispered, "Daniel Blackwell." The air grew cold. The painted eyes blinked. Slowly, deliberately, Ethan grabbed a fire poker and smashed the glass covering the frame. Shards fell like frozen tears. The moment the last piece hit the floor, the portrait rippled violently. Daniel's painted form pressed against the surface, mouth opening in a silent plea. Behind him, the ghostly figures recoiled, as if freed from a spell, and the canvas began to peel at the edges, revealing not wood, but darkness. Endless, hungry darkness. A low hum filled the room, the sound of 1,000 trapped breaths finally released. The ghostly figures in the background dissolved into mist, whispering thanks as they faded into the walls. But the darkness behind the canvas pulsed, growing larger, hungrier. Daniel's form stretched toward Ethan, fingers almost breaking through the surface. "Take my hand," his voice echoed, not from the painting, but from inside Ethan's mind. "Before it takes you too." Ethan reached out, trembling. The moment their fingers touched, memories flooded him. Generations of Blackwells vanishing, the patriarch who started the ritual, the truth that the house wasn't haunted by ghosts, but by something far older that fed on grief and bloodline loyalty. The painting was just a cage, and the real monster, it lived in the space between brushstrokes. As Daniel pulled him closer, Ethan realized. Saving Daniel meant stepping into the frame, but staying meant becoming the next anchor. He had seconds to choose, and the darkness behind the canvas was already reaching for him. Ethan didn't pull away. Instead, he stepped forward and pressed his palm flat against the canvas. The surface gave like wet silk, then swallowed his hand whole. Cold fire raced up his arm, burning not with heat, but with memory. Every Blackwell who'd vanished, every silent scream trapped in oil and varnish. He saw Daniel's final moments, not as surrender, but as sacrifice. He'd stayed to protect the next heir. And now, Ethan understood his choice wasn't between life and death, but between chains and freedom. The darkness behind the painting surged, tendrils of shadow lashing out like whips. But Ethan didn't flinch. "Your name is Daniel Blackwell," he said aloud, voice steady. "And you're coming home." The words struck the canvas like a key turning in a rusted lock. A crack split the portrait down the middle, not from force but from truth. And through it, Daniel stepped out, pale, trembling, but real. The moment Daniel crossed into the real world, the manor groaned as if in pain. Walls cracked, windows shattered inward. The painted garden outside wilted into gray ash. The darkness behind the canvas shrieked. A sound that wasn't sound, but pure absence, before collapsing in on itself like a dying star. The portrait crumbled to dust, leaving only an empty frame hanging crookedly on the wall. Daniel fell to his knees, gasping, tears cutting clean tracks through the soot on his face. He looked at his hands, flesh, blood, pulse, real. Ethan helped him up, heart pounding. "It's over," he whispered, but Daniel shook his head, eyes wide with dread. "No," he said. "It's just sleeping. It always sleeps." Until the next air comes close enough to touch the frame. Outside, dawn broke over the ruins. Birds sang. The world moved on. But in the attic, a single drop of black paint fell from the ceiling and landed on the floor with a soft plink. They left the manor that morning, never looking back. Daniel stayed with Ethan's family for weeks, then months, slowly relearning how to be human, how to eat without tasting paint, how to sleep without dreaming of stillness. But he kept one habit. Every night at midnight he checked the mirrors, just to be sure his reflection blinked when he did. Years passed. The Blackwell estate was sold, then abandoned again after strange rumors spread. Whispers of figures seen in upper windows, of portraits appearing where none had hung before. Ethan grew up, became an artist himself. He never painted people, only landscapes, empty houses, open doors. One winter, he received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, stained with what looked like old oil paint. On it, written in shaky script, asterisk, "Thank you for remembering my name. Don't let them forget yours." Asterisk, he burned it that night, but the smell of turpentine lingered for days. Decades later, an elderly Ethan returned to the ruins. The manor was little more than stone foundations and ivy-choked chimneys. He brought his granddaughter, Lily, 10 years old, curious, with eyes too knowing for her age. She wandered ahead, stopping at the edge of what once was the study. "Grandpa," she called, pointing to a pile of rubble. "Why is that frame still hanging?" He froze. There, nailed to a splintered beam, was the original portrait frame, rusted, broken, but intact. And inside it, nothing, just air. Yet as Lily stepped closer, the space within the frame seemed to darken, to deepen. Ethan grabbed her hand and pulled her back. "Don't look too long," he said, voice rough with memory. That night, back in town, Lily woke at 3:17 a.m. She walked to her window and stared at the distant woods where the manor stood. In the moonlight, she could have sworn she saw a figure waving from an attic window that no longer existed. And in her dream, a voice whispered, asterisk, "Your turn soon, asterisk." The cycle never truly ends. It only waits, in frames, in mirrors, in the quiet spaces between heartbeats. The house may crumble, the names may fade, but the hunger remains. It feeds on memory, on legacy, on the foolish belief that blood makes you safe. And every generation, someone new stands too close to the portrait, long enough to be seen, long enough to be chosen, long enough to become part of the still life. So if you ever pass an old manor with a single empty frame in its window, don't stop, don't stare, and whatever you do, don't whisper your name, because somewhere in the silence, something is already painting you in.